There's reasons companies fail. Maybe their technology was just too hard to develop, and so they can never get it done. It's probably happened to some rocket companies. Maybe the product was too early for the market, or maybe it was too late for the market. So the market really wasn't there for the company. The company could just run out of money. Depending on who their backers are, they may just run out of money. Or you may not have a market fit. You may have a great product, but nobody really wants it. But then the fifth one, it's execution. Execution probably kills more companies than any other one. Is literally everybody has to kind of do their job. The one thing I say here is not only you on the team, you're all starting, playing, you're in the game. San Francisco 49ers aren't going to go out on the field without a defensive end or without a linebacker. Right. You need great people in every position to be a winner.
Welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start from the top. Tell me about Bolster.
I'll give you the history of Bolster because it's a really good way to understand what it does. Okay. Bolster created a website back in 2019, before COVID, that you could go to, type in any URL, and it would tell you if it's phishing or not. And the two co-founders who built that, they came out of the Cisco email security group. And they put together these AI algorithms for intent, for images, for natural language, and other things. And this is back before anybody talked about AI, right? This is before AI was cool. But they had it, and they released it, and it got very popular. And to date, it's tested 6.5 billion URLs. So wow. It's probably one of the largest training sets for this type of thing out there. They got some attention from some VCs and got funded. And they created an enterprise version of that, and we sell that to companies and who have phishing worries, or they have worries of people doing impersonations or creating fraudulent content or fraudulent copies of their products and selling them online, things like that. But it's really it's a little bit different than phishing that you think of in typical email. In your email programs will flag phishing. This is offensive. It goes out and finds where the site's going to start, where the phishing attack starts, and then it takes it down. So it's very much offensive, preferably, hopefully, before it ever gets to the company. So it's it's offensive anti-phishing, which is a little bit different than the more normal in your email anti-phishing products, which I think you still need as well. I think you need offensive and defensive just to be safe.
So it's really kind of like a brand protection company.
It does a lot of brand protection. A lot of our customers are biased for brand protection. It's phishing, all that brand protection stuff is usually some type of phishing, whether I'm trying to get your credentials to do account takeover or whether I'm just trying to get you to buy a knockoff product. It's all kind of phishing. I lump it all under the phishing umbrella, but it's very much brand protection. And a lot of our customers are the trust and safety groups of their organization.
Tell me a little bit, can you give me an example of like one of the most common kind of phishing things that you guys are protecting against?
I don't know if they're the most common or just the ones that just popped up recently. And so they're top of mind. It'd be interesting to go back and see what the most common was the last 5 years or so. But like we have a big antivirus customer. They've got literally millions of endpoints out there. And their customers get these emails from these scammers saying, hey, your license is about to expire. Please renew right now. And, if you renew, then you just lose your fee because that money's not going to the antivirus company. And then the license ends up expiring a couple months later. So that's a big one that we have been seeing a lot of. We also see, this one's not prevalent, but it's huge. And the reason it's not so prevalent because it happens to kind of specialized finance companies like VCs and real estate investment trusts, but they get their money from limited partners, right?
Right.
And sometimes these scammers will set up a lookalike website and they'll start talking to the limited partners. And it's not like they just do it for a day, they'll do it for months on end. And there'll
Mhm.
be all kinds of people. They'll have the partner, they'll have an admin, and they'll create LinkedIn profiles saying they are at those venture capital funds or those real estate investment trusts. So the limited partners think they're talking to the investment house, and then they'll end up wiring money to the
Mm.
scammers. I've seen over $1 million lost that way. Anytime we talk to a CISO of a VC, they know exactly this type of scam. It's very, very prevalent in their world, prevalent scam in their world. And we actually added something to our product to hopefully address it. We will find the typo squatting domain, the lookalike domain, and we'll watch it. And if it goes live or gets an MX record, starts sending out emails, we can take it down. Or if it's just suspicious, we'll put that domain into our customers' Outlook block list. So none of
Mm.
their employees will get those emails. It's part of the
Right.
offensive strategy that we have. But we allow now them to send those same bad domains to their business partners. Even though their business partner isn't a customer of ours, they can send that information to them, and hopefully that will protect them. Otherwise, our customer's not in the loop. We're not in the loop. The loop is in between the limited partner and the scammer, even though the scammer's impersonating our customer, right? And,
Right.
and so we have an interest in making sure our customers are protected. So that's why we did that. It's an interesting service.
Now, when it comes to like phishing and your product, I'm assuming there's some things that you can automate. Are there areas that just you can't automate within a product like this?
We have automated almost all of it. And the things that we don't automate, we have tools that give us semi automation. And where we have semi automation and not full automation is with certain social media sites, right?
Okay.
Like if you're going to do one of these scams, very, very often you'll create an Instagram account or a Facebook ad or a Google ad, and they'll link to the phishing website, right? And so they just look more legitimate and they're more complicated. But so we have a social media module, an app store module. We even have a dark web module because we're looking on things on the dark web as well. Most social media sites don't allow us or anybody to parse through their information with a bot, right? To do
Mhm.
it automatically. Like we can scan, vast portions of the internet automatically, but we can't scan Facebook automatically because Facebook won't let us. And we don't want to get in a fight with Facebook by changing our bot to get around their anti bot because when we find something, we're going to have to call Facebook and ask them to take it down. And we want to stay in their good graces, if you will. Those are the things that require the most manual effort for us is crawling Meta and some of the other social media sites.
Okay. So you have tools that you developed internally and teams internally do that work then.
Right, right. And so when they find something, it's really easy to get that information into our platform. It's not a manual effort. You can just like click a button in the app that they used to scan it, and it grabs
Hmm.
all the information and puts it into our system. But they're not, crawling the Facebook automatically because
Right.
it's not allowed.
Now your background has been customer success, is that right?
Yeah, I spent a long time in customer success.
What was your connection and how did you come to Bolster?
Well, I guess I can give you my real abbreviated history. I had my own company back in the internet boom, and it was a photo sharing site, and it grew up. It went public probably before its time, but that was kind of the fashion back then. And
Right.
then after the dot-com crash, I sold it to Canon of Japan. But the guy who built our architecture and became a really good friend of mine founded Fortify Software. And Fortify was one of the original static analysis companies. And so I went there, pre revenue and worked with my friend there, Roger Thornton. We built that company up and it was eventually acquired by HP. And I think it was he gave me the title of customer success. I never even heard of it. But I remember what he told me to do when I first got there. He says, get the product out of engineering and deliver it somewhere.
Right.
Install it at a customer and see what they like and what they don't like. And I never heard of the term customer success before, but it was really interesting back then because the software was so new and there were a lot of issues and customers had certain wants. And so I got kind of good at being as technical enough to work on it, but I had enough people skills, I guess, to work with the customer and kind of navigate those early days. And so after that company grew up and got bought by HP, went to another company with that same group of people called Alien Vault and did the same thing there. and that company got built up and was sold to AT&T. And then I was on another company that Roger was on the board of, and it got bought by Imperva, which is a big security company. And then
Right.
I did something else for a little while, but then I knew some of the investors here at Bolster, and so I came in, started meeting with their CEO at the time, and really liked him, a great guy, and worked with him for about a year. I originally just met him to talk to him about some of the issues they were having, and after about 4 months, I just came on full time and did that job for a little over a year, and then he stepped out of that role, and I moved into the CEO role.
I've worked with hundreds of CEOs, and I always feel like CEOs have something other than just as a CEO. Sometimes they're a product CEO, sometimes they're, an engineering minded CEO or a sales CEO. So every once in a while, you'll come across a customer success type CEO, and those people tend to be, obviously obsessed with the customer, which we're all told we need to be, right? We all need to be
Very
obsessed with the
important.
customer. What's that mean to you? Like, what's that phrase mean to you, being obsessed with the customer?
Well, in this particular business, it's something we're working on a lot right now is making the customer kind of a hero in their organization, right?
Hmm.
You can tell that them that, hey, we stopped 10 phishing attacks last quarter. But if we tell them we stopped 10 phishing attacks, 9 of them came from this one guy who happens to be in Morocco. That makes our customer just the resident expert on phishing. Now, he doesn't provide him with a really nice report, and he can take that report to management, but he can talk about it in detail. What's going on, or he could say this is a brand new phishing attack. It was only discovered about 3 months ago, and then it hit us because it's a particular phishing kit that they're using. There's a very famous phishing kit called Robin Bank that people use, right? And are they using that one? Are they using this one? And we get the phishing kit information quite often. It's not public, obviously, but we have ways of getting it when we can. But we want to arm our customers with all that information so that they're just walking, talking experts on the phishing attacks they're getting. I just think it kind of makes them look like heroes in their own organization because they're technical people anyway, and they
Right.
like to talk about this kind of stuff like we do.
Yeah. A lot of companies, it's probably looks different to each company what, success is for their client and being obsessed about that success for them. But for you guys, it's equipping them to be experts.
Exactly. They can be experts. And also, it gives them a little indication of what's going on, maybe to some extent, what to expect. I wouldn't want to go too far out on that limb because you never know what's going to come up. But if you start to see particular types of attacks or particular type of scams, those are important to see what they're doing. Like we talked about the tech support scam, there's also a lot of hiring scams where people will say they're working for a company and they're taking these poor kids that just graduated from college and job market's not real good. And they go through this lengthy interview process where they meet all these people. And in the end, they're given the job. And all they got to do is go to this website and buy the computer. And of course, they
Oh,
go
wow.
there and they buy the computer and they don't get the computer and they don't get the job. And it's got to be heartbreaking for them because literally they'll spend months weeks doing all the interviews with all the different people. And then these people will set up a website that makes them look like a legitimate company. So
Yeah. So it's the responsibility of companies at large to really stop these phishing scams from happening, right? I mean, is the government getting involved, or where's their protection around this?
That's such a great question. If someone were to land on the beach and invade us right now, the army would come down and help you out. But if someone breaks into your company or does something like that, there's really not too many places you can go. The government, I think, is much, much more involved in it now than they were.
Hmm.
Back when I first got into it 20 years ago. There's the FBI, other legal organizations will try to help. But I think the amount of attention that it's getting right now is just huge. And now I'm seeing companies feel like they need to do something for their own liability. Because if you're
Right.
out there not even trying to prevent this, you're liable. Look what they happened to the Telegram CEO. He got arrested. He's arrested for what? For not taking down content that was deemed offensible or something. And so we do a lot of Telegram takedowns, to be honest. They have a lot of stuff there. But I think organizations feel like they need to do something. And it's gotten so prevalent. And I don't know if you saw the Netflix show about the little village in India where the whole village got involved in creating these scams. I was in India 2 weeks ago, and they told me that a lot of these villages are doing it now. And it's
Mm,
just you get these buildings with, you know, hundreds of people in there, and they're all dedicated to scamming people. You know,
wow.
they learn how to speak the local language, whether it's English or French or wherever they're trying to scam, and I mean, it's like a $45 billion a year business right now. So it's a big deal. But back to your original question, I think companies feel like they have a liability if they don't try to stop this type of thing.
Yeah. It looks like companies used to be on the defensive, but the strategy now is to be on the offensive. Is that correct?
I think so. And I don't think you're swapping offense for defense or defense for offense. I think you're adding offensive capabilities to your defense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, you've been in a lot of different stages of companies, early stage and growth stage. What would you say at the end of the day really makes the difference between these companies succeeding or failing?
It's always comes down to the people, in my opinion. At least the companies I've been to, and my friend Roger, who I referred to a little bit, used to always talk about like there's reasons companies fail. Maybe their technology was just too hard to develop, and so they could never get it done. It's probably happened to some rocket companies. Maybe the product was too early for the market, or maybe it was too late for the market. So the market really wasn't there for the company. The company could just run out of money. Depending on who their backers are, they may just run out of money. Or you may not have a market fit. You may have a great product, but nobody really wants it. But then the fifth one, it's execution. Execution probably kills more companies than any other one. Is literally everybody has to kind of do their job. The one thing I say here is not only you on the team, you're all starting, playing. You're in the game. San Francisco 49ers aren't going to go out on the field without a defensive end or without a
Right.
linebacker. You need great people in every position to be a winner. And so I think the number one thing for us to scale in all the companies I've been at is getting a really good team and then executing, you know,
Yeah.
having the team execute.
Yeah. I think that's so true. Earlier in my career, I think I made a mistake of it just was have the right people on the bus. Good to Great talks about get the right people on the bus. But you get the right people on the bus and then you have to execute. As everybody always says, execution's everything. And I think it is like everything at the end of the day, because you have to get those people working really well together. You get them communicating. You have to get them in alignments, get them learning. I think learning is so important. These early stage and growth is that you need venture back companies doing something that's never been done before. Right. And so you are going to take a path that nobody has ever taken. So you have to learn very quickly and execute on those learnings really quickly. And I think the last thing is just empowering the team to work together, getting out of their way. So if you can lay that vision and that mission and that plan, then as a CEO, I think it's letting them just execute and run.
I think that's a lot of it. I was at a one of our VCs had a little event last week, and and so I got to be in a room with a bunch of other founders and CEOs, and we were all talking about it, and everybody agreed on this. You want to hire people based upon their ability to do something, not really what they've done. You know, to bring in somebody that appears to have done it all, well, maybe they did do it all, but if you get somebody that doesn't really know the like security, maybe they're not security experts, but they're got a lot of energy, they're hardworking, and they want to
Yeah.
learn, and they're going to go out and tear it up. That's a much better person than somebody who's got all these ticks on their resume because
Right.
they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll get things done. We've had experiences here and other places where you get some very senior people, and boy, on paper they look great, but boy, when it comes to rolling up their sleeves and getting the job done, this isn't the role for them.
It really, at the end of the day, comes down to being willing to be adaptable. When I started, I was, with venture back companies was .com era. .com was blowing up when I graduated with my entrepreneurship and finance degree. And I jumped in a bunch of those companies. And I remember back then, especially right before 2000, a lot of companies were pivoting, right? Money was drying up, companies were pivoting. And the word pivot at that time was like a negative word, the word pivot, because that meant that you were changing directions. You didn't find product market fit. But what I've found over the years is the ability to pivot is what makes these teams so powerful. And it's not that you have to make a huge product pivot, but it's that everyday pivoting, knowing where you're going and having a plan. But since you don't know all the information, you're always going to have these like micro pivots, these micro changes. And the teams and the people that are very adaptable to those changes are the ones that tend to succeed. They kind of find their way in the midst of being in sometimes absolute darkness because they just don't know what they're getting into. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that pivoting that you mentioned. It's not necessarily a product pivot. And when we went to Alien Vault, well, back up. When we were at Fortify, it was an enterprise sale. We would fly to New York, take people out for lunch. And after about 9 months, they'd give us an order. And about a year and a half after that, they'd give us a really big order. They'd expand. And when we got to Alien Vault, we thought the same thing. We flew to New York, but nobody would buy that product, all our old friends. And so we had to pivot from doing those enterprise sale with a bunch of elephant hunters to having an inside sales group that did a velocity sales model. And we hired somebody out who had built SolarWinds. Rita Savalji knew how to do that, and she did it just wonderfully. Learned so much from her. But that's what made Alien Vault. The product didn't. Well, there were some changes to the product for sure, but that pivoting the sales model is what really made the company take off.
Yeah.
And that was a hard thing to do, but that's what made the company, that inside sales group that really got that going.
And I think that it's at in all levels and all functions and all teams within early stage companies because it's dialing in the marketing, what's working, what's not, and like you said, that sales process or the way that you are going to market. I think it's in every single area because if there was a blueprint for these businesses, they wouldn't be venture backed. They'd already have been done, right? One of the things I used to say a lot is if you're willing to learn, you're willing to change, right? And so the people in these companies, they're not willing to learn, then you have to change your people because you need people in there that are willing to learn, willing to change, because there's going to be change all the time. And that change isn't chaos, actually. And I think a lot of people get confused that startups, growth companies are chaos because they're changing all the time. That's not really chaos. It's really the scientific method. We're testing things out. We figure out what works. We're going to do more of that. We figure out what doesn't work. We're going to stop doing that. Not all companies are good at stopping
Yeah.
part.
I love that analogy, though. I'm going to use that in the future, if you don't mind, because it does bother people when there's change like that. But and we've had some of that obviously here, and it's upset some people. But it is part of growing and something that companies like the venture-backed company needs to do. So,
Yeah.
and then another thing that I've been really trying to emphasize here with the team, we measure everything. We put up a TV and we have a dashboard up there that measures everything from marketing to sales to product delivery deadlines and everything else. And I keep telling the people we measure those things not to find out who's doing good and who's doing bad, because we got objectives. We all agreed on objectives. We had a meeting back when I first started. This was our objective. We all agree on that. Now we got strategies, and we're going to talk about strategies. And then we got tactics. And quite frankly, you're going to have to do your own tactics. That's not going to be dictated from up above, because you ought to know how to do it. But
Right.
we're going to measure it, because if the strategy is wrong or the tactics are wrong, how are you going to know? Right? You got to measure it and say, oh, this isn't working. Maybe the strategy is wrong. Let's change it.
Yep.
So
100%. And I think one way I like to talk about KPIs is KPIs are there to help us learn the business. Especially in the early stages, you're going to guess at some of these KPIs, and you should guess at them because otherwise you'll never start measuring them.
yeah,
You're never going to measure them unless you put some KPIs on the board. It's not to dictate, like you said, how to do the business. It's to help us learn what works and what doesn't work. The leadership teams that I work with, I love to set KPIs with them, and every one of my peak teams has a set of KPIs to help metrics to help them dial in the business. And how I like to explain that is, imagine you're flying a plane and you're gonna land on an island. On your dashboard, this is probably why we call it a dashboard, right? Like, what are those things that you're going to want to know to make sure that you land where you want to land when you want to land there? You'd want to know, probably your elevation, right? You'd probably want to know your speed, maybe longitude, latitude, maybe how much gas you have, fuel you have in this plane. And sometimes leadership teams, and I know that you're a big advocate of KPIs, but sometimes leadership teams are uncomfortable trying to figure those out, or they feel like they're going to demotivate the team by putting some numbers up there. I always try to encourage them like, hey, let's start with 3 numbers. If it's revenue or if it's maybe it's sales leads, let's start with 3 numbers. And they might, 2 of them might be wrong, and we might figure that out next quarter, and then we'll modify them. But you have to start somewhere. You have to put a stake in the ground somewhere, I think, with KPIs. And then it's giving the team an understanding what that KPI means. Is that like a high goal? Is that a mid-level goal? Or is that a low goal? Providing that context, I think, around KPIs is important for that team too. The best time to start KPIs is like planting a tree. It's today.
I think so too. And that you mentioned demotivating. I've heard that response. Oh, we don't want to show them. It's going to demotivate everybody. So when I first took over, I showed a slide of the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL championship game last year, which most people won't get, but everybody here in the Bay Area gets. But at the start of halftime, they were behind 24-7 or something like that. They were
Right.
losing. Okay. But the same group of people, they changed their strategies a little bit. The same group of people came out and won that game and went on to the Super Bowl. I think it was important to know that they were losing. And so when we look at our KPIs, they may not be the best, but you need to know it because it's going to feel great when we do win.
I think that cadence of using that sports analogy of if it's quarters or it's period, halftime, embedding that cadence in companies is so important because we do need to plan at the beginning of the year what success looks like by the end of the year. For a team, that would be scoring more goals than the other team, right? But then re-looking at that each quarter and saying, where are we at now? Are we hitting these KPIs? Is the other team ahead? Are we ahead? What do we need to adjust? And so I think part of every good session that we do with leadership teams is looking at what's working, what's not working, having time for triage to discuss it, solve some of those problems, and then planning the next 90 days to really like make sure that we're making momentum and coming back to that next quarter, coming back to it at halftime, at the third quarter, right?
Yeah.
And then hopefully at the end of the game, you won. But by creating that cadence, I think it creates momentum, and that consistency of showing up in between every single quarter, I think really matters for those teams.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too, for sure.
So one of the things I've heard you talk about, and I think this comes from, is it Roger Thornton? I think is Ballistic Adventures. Yeah. You mentioned this, and I love this. The idea of just build a great company. Don't build a company to sell. Because by having the mentality of just building a great company, you'll actually probably create a better company to sell. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that was the saying Roger used to say, just build a great company and then someone will come along and buy it. You won't ever have to sell it. Someone will just knock on the door and say, all right, this is a great company. I want to buy it. And that's a better price almost by definition. But it is really important to have everybody thinking about just building a great company. And I think the companies did with Roger. I still know all the people at both of those companies. And everybody talks about the great experiences they had at both Fortify and Alien Vault, because it just meant something to be there. And there were companies that when they started out, nobody knew of, but by the end, everybody in the security world, our little security world, everybody knew of. You created something, and that is something to put on your resume as, yeah, I was there when this company went from nothing to something. It's a big deal. You learn a lot. And, I would think that if you're building a company to sell, you would spend most of your time out talking to potential acquiring companies as opposed to customers.
Right.
And I think it'd be better to have a whole bunch of customers, and then eventually the acquirers will come around.
Yeah. And I think that transcends all the way through the organization of everybody's mentality of building something great means you're not taking shortcuts. You're building strong product. You're building strong relationships. You're doing the things right versus doing them quickly or in a false way that looks right. And I think that mentality of just building a great company transcends. I think why I love working with venture-backed companies or companies where, sometimes this is even like an employee-owned company. I have some peak teams that are ESOPs. I love the mentality that everybody has something to gain, not just salary, but they have some equity in it. If we can go farther together, everybody wins. And I think that really empowers the team.
It does. We're a big believer in that. We have a group over in India. Like I said, I was over there just a couple of weeks ago. Historically, they have not had stock. And so we're in the process of fixing that. It turns out it's not that hard to do. A lot of other things in India are really hard to do. It's a country with a lot of red tape, but we can do the stock options. So we are definitely want those people to feel like they're part of the company because they are. They're all starters. They're all on the team and they're starting, and they should have stock options as well. So we are doing that. We think everybody should be kind of bought into that common goal, right?
Yeah. And it's challenging when even when you have teams in the US or greater North America that are in disparate areas, it's hard to create that unity and create that culture. It's even harder when you have teams that are in other countries, other time zones, to create that one unified culture. But what I like about what you have been putting attention and time on is really trying to cultivate that and bring awareness of putting attention on that. And I think starting with equity is a great way to do that.
Yeah, equity is a good thing. And another thing we started doing is one of the co-founders went over there about a month and a half ago. I went over there. One of the other principals here, the head of research, is going over in about 3 weeks. And so we're continuing to have somebody from the US there. And
Yep.
I do monthly town halls on their time. I'll do them at 9 o'clock at night, our time. But we're also bringing them here. It's something that they're very excited about. We had some visa problems. Like, turns out to get a visa to come to the US is not easy. Even if you work at the company and you're just coming over here for a couple of weeks of meetings. And, like we had a release coming up, and I thought the two principal engineers that are in India working on it, they should be here, 2 weeks before the release, because I bet there's going to be a bunch of things that don't work right at the end, right? And have to be fixed overnight. But we couldn't get them visas. Finally
Yeah.
got one of them a visa the other day, and they're coming over in about 3 weeks. But and they're very excited to, they've never been to the U.S. before, and so just to have them come through the office and just to keep that, we go there, they go here, and we do meetings on their time, sometimes on our time, sometimes, and you kind of got to break that up. And a little experiment they did it in Perva at one time is they had all these tables at a sales conference. They give us problems to work on, and one of them was, how do you handle a company that's got offices all over the world? Turns out you have to share the pain. You have to have if you want to have a group meeting, one day you have it on US times, next time you have it on Israeli times, next time you have it on India times.
Yeah.
Everybody has to suffer.
Right. That's great. I love that.
And I was kind of curious how you saw, I kind of think the security market was a little overfunded a couple of years ago. But how do you feel, venture backed companies kind of declining right now? Or I know the money going into it is declining, but it also seems like there's more and more VCs all the time. But what's the state of the market in your opinion?
In my opinion, one, I would say that, there has been a slowdown of money going into funds, and the number of funds have grown more than ever. And that was kind of coming at the same time, is that we probably had more fund and fund managers than ever. And all of a sudden, money coming in has definitely slowed down. So I think those two things are definitely happening at the same time. However, right now I'm starting to feel there is a resurgence of capital and interest. There is never been too many entrepreneurs. I think we can always have more entrepreneurs. The teams that are succeeding are really ones that are focused around most important behaviors to be successful as a team. The success rate of ventures can be a lot higher than it is, even in markets where there's less capital. Now, we might not be able to go as fast. More today than other times is that there's more information about how to actually successfully build an early stage and growth stage company. I think in the past, there wasn't these models and these operating systems out there that really help define what you need to do, how to do it, and bring teams together to actually act upon that. I think right now in today's market, it may be a little bit more tough. I do think it's coming back as far as capital, but I think there's more information and more ability for companies to succeed more than ever before.
That makes a lot of sense when you say it. I hope that's the case.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to hit you with one last question. I always call this one the most important question. It's probably the most important question you've ever been asked. And so it's good that you're sitting down. So this is the scenario. You are on a desert island for the rest of your life which sounds bleak, but it's a beautiful tropical desert island. So I hope you like tropical weather. The good news is that you have plenty of food, shelter, you're taken care of. But the one thing that you don't have is entertainment. There's no entertainment on the island. But luckily for you, old boombox drifted ashore with endless batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to the rest of your life. What music album are you going to bring?
I would probably bring that Rolling Stones Greatest Hits. The double album that I have.
Yep.
I forget what it's called, but yeah, I'd probably bring that one.
Well, that's a great answer. I don't think you could get sick of that.
Yeah. My wife would not. Assuming she's stuck on the island with me, she'll be happy.
Well, yeah, you'll be good if you brought the album she liked.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. So Rolling Stones Greatest Hits.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Jack, thanks for joining me on Tech Scenes Unplugged. It was fun having you on the show.
Oh, thanks. Enjoyed it. Thank you.